This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, good morning everyone. Shalom Aleichem, Baruch Haba. We have an amazing topic today. The Mishnah in Kesuvos Daf Pei Daled brought a case of somebody who died. He left a wife, he left a balchayv, he left Yarshim, and he also had a pikadon or a milveh in other people's possession. Rav Tarfon says you give it to the weakest one. Rabbi Akiva says you give it to the Yarshim because they all need to swear and the Yarshim don't need to swear. However, if you have peiros, then kol hakoydem behem zoicha. If the woman takes more than she needs, or the balchayv more than she needs, Rav Tarfon says the extra goes to the weakest. Rabbi Akiva says ein merachamin min adin, you give it to the Yarshim. So the Gemara asks, why does Rabbi Akiva say Yinasnu liyarshim only on the extra? Everything belongs to the Yarshim. Because the reason of Rabbi Akiva is because the Yarshim don't have to swear. So then, in that case, the Yarshim shouldn't only get the Moisar, they should get everything. So the Gemara says, Ein Chanami. Since Rav Tarfon was talking about the extra, Rabbi Akiva also spoke about the extra. The Gemara says, and what about according to Rabbi Akiva, grabbing doesn't help at all? Says the Gemara, Rabbi Akiva would agree, grabbing helps mechayim. And Rav Nachman also said the same thing. The Gemara has a machloika. The Gemara says, and according to Rav Tarfon, where exactly is it placed? Rav and Shmuel say in Rishus Rambam not a simta. Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish say even in a simta. Now the Gemara continues. The Dayanim donned a case like Rav Tarfon that the Tfisa works, and Rish Lakish retracted because of Rabbi Akiva. To which Rabbi Yochanan said, "You're making Rabbi Akiva like a din Torah." So Gemara says, what exactly do Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish argue on? Do they argue on if you make a mistake in a Mishnah, do you retract or not? Where Rish Lakish says Dvar Mishnah Chayzer, and Rabbi Yochanan says Einay Chayzer. No, the Gemara says everyone says Chayzer. The question is the halacha like Rabbi Akiva only from his friend and not from his Rebbi? That's the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan. And Rish Lakish says even the halacha is like Rabbi Akiva even against his Rebbi, Reb Tarfon. Okay, so the Gemara seems to establish that Reb Tarfon is the Rebbi of Rabbi Akiva. Then the Gemara says, well, you could say everybody would say the halacha is like Rabbi Akiva against his friend and not against his Rebbi. And the question is Reb Tarfon the Rebbi of Rabbi Akiva? Rish Lakish says he's not. Rabbi Yochanan says he is. Or everybody says he's not. He's just a friend. And here the machlokes is the halacha like Rabbi Akiva, or are we just inclined to say like Rabbi Akiva? It's interesting that there's a discussion here, is Rav Tarfon the Rebbi of Rabbi Akiva? So Rav Asi asked me this morning, why can't we bring a raya that Rabbi Akiva was not a student of Reb Tarfon from the Haggadah Shel Pesach? Right? This Gemara seems to be discussing the issue of whether who was the student of who. In other words, is Rabbi Akiva a student of Reb Tarfon, or is he a Talmud Chaver of Reb Tarfon? Well, the Basi wanted to know, why can't we bring a raya from the Haggadah? Maseh b'Rabbi Eliezer, b'Rabbi Yoshua, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Tarfon. Now let's talk about this order for a moment. Rabbi Reuven Margolis in his Haggadah says that the order of the Tanoim listed are based on the idea that Gadol Yoshev Emsa, the greatest one, sits in the middle. Now who is the greatest one over here? I mean, you could say Rabbi Akiva was the greatest one. He, in a way, was even greater than Moshe Rabbeinu. Nevertheless, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah was the Nasi. How do we know he was the Nasi? Because according to the Girsa of the Rambam in the Haggadah, the next passage, Amar Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, the Rambam's Girsa says, Amar Lahem Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. That at that Seder, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah said, Harei ani keben shivim shana. Yeah? That means it happened when Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah was the Nasi. So that would make sense why he's sitting in the middle. And that means he's flanked on the right side by Rabbi Shua, the Av Bezdin. But on the left side, you have Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Tarfon. So Rabbi Asi pointed out, Rabbi Akiva is mentioned first. Rabbi Akiva is mentioned first. Should that not indicate that Rabbi Akiva was not a student of Rabbi Tarfon? Because if he was a student of Rabbi Tarfon, it should say Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, V'Rabbi Tarfon, V'Rabbi Akiva. Okay? So I was hoping to be able to give shir on this morning. First of all, if you could connect Daf Hashavua to the Haggadah, that's a win-win. I mean, you got to give me points for that. To connect Iyun, Daf Hashavua, Shir to Haggadah, I get something for that. Maybe a mug? I don't know. But I was looking around. Rabasi, I told Rabasi to send me the Mesifta Gemara comments on this. Meanwhile, I looked in the Mesifta Haggadah, and sure enough, I looked through a lot of Haggadahs. The Mesifta Haggadah brings that Tosfos and Kesuvos on Daf Kuf Hey deals with this issue, but sort of roundabout. Let's look at Kesuvos on Daf Kuf Hey. The Gemara over there is talking about the order of various Chachamim, and Tosfos Divrei Amaschal the Chashav Leikatani. Tosfos says, V'li nira, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. The ninth line, the Chashav Le HaChashav Yoser. That the more important you are, you're counted first. By the way, where else do we have this idea that the more Chashav you are, you're counted first? We have it by the Menois Safchad. No? There's an idea that the more Chashav you are, you're counted first. So Tosfos says, V'af agav diktani chanan mesresha hachanami ashkachan. Listen to this. Masa Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Yeshua, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, Rabbi Akiva. Frag Tosfos, who is more chashav, Rabbi Akiva or Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah? Rabbi Akiva is more chashav than Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, even though Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah was the Nasi. Afal pish Rabbi Akiva haya chashav me Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, shehu haya roish l'chacham. Rabbi Akiva was the head of all the chachamim. Uv'chol duchti amrina, and we always say kagoin Rabbi Akiva v'chaverav. And in the end of the first parak of Yavama, is gabe ma'aseh Rabbi Doisa ben Horkenes to Amar Lehem Rabbi Yeshua, ani elech, I'm going to go, v'acharav mi Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, v'acharav mi Rabbi Akiva, uchshenichnesu etzlo Amar Rabbi Yeshua, yesh ben la'Azariah chavereinu. They didn't even know Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah was alive. Ula Rabbi Akiva Amar, ata hu sheshimcha hoylech misoifa olam yad soifai. So Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, they didn't even know who he was. Rabbi Akiva was world famous, but nevertheless, Rabbi Elazar was mentioned first. Why? You know why Rabbi Elazar was mentioned first? Shahaya mi mishpacha miyuchesas yoser. He was from a more prestigious family, right? Rabbi Akiva was from Gerim, and Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah was Asiri LaEzra. V'gam b'shvil nisiyusai, and also because Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah was a Nasi. Now, according to this Tosfos, it comes out, if you wanted to know why was Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah listed ahead of Rabbi Akiva, even though Rabbi Akiva was greater, A, he was more miyuchases, and B, he was the Nasi. So then why does it say Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Yeshua first in that Mishnah? Rabbi Yeshua was the Av Bezdin. Rabbi Elazar, we're talking about Rabbi Elazar Haggadah, Rabbi Elazar ben Horkenes. Maybe because the Mishnah says in Avos that he outweighs all the Chachamim together. That's the first Tosfos I wanted to point out. But there's another Tosfos in Masechta Avodah Zarah. Thank you, Naftali. Naftali is at Nashir also today because today is the Isru Chag of Shevet Naftali. I had to say that, of course, Naftali, you know? So, Tosfos in Avodah Zarah, Daf Memhei Amud Aleph, Divrei Hamaschal Amar. Tosfos says like this. Look at Tosfos Divrei Hamaschal Amar Rabbi Akiva, Ani Oivin va'oidin lefanecha. By the way, this is a very interesting Mishnah. where Rabbi Akiva says, I will demonstrate wherever there's a tall mountain in Eretz Yisrael, you should know there was Avodah Zarah there. Based on this Mishnah, the Chassam Sofer has a tshuva, so why was the Har HaBayis mutter to make the Makom HaMikdashan if every single mountain was a Makom Avodah Zarah? So Chassam Sofer quotes his Rebbe, Rav Nosson Adler, because originally it was not a har, it was a makom. It was a flat land, and therefore they did not put Avodah Zarah there. It was only because of the tefillah of Avraham Avinu that makom became a har. So Tosfos says that the fact that Rabbi Akiva says Ani oivin va'oidin lefanecha, that's mashma that Rabbi Yossi HaGlili was older than Rabbi Akiva, because Rabbi Akiva says, I would come to you. Also in the last parak of Gittin, it mentions Rabbi Yossi HaGlili before Rabbi Elazar ben Azan and Rabbi Akiva. But at the end of Eizehu Makaiman, Gabi Rav Tarfon Rabbi Akiva v'hoya sham Talmud echad shabal lefnei chachamim tchila v'Rabbi Yossi HaGlili shemai v'amrina nami be'ervin she'amra loy brurya debisud Rameir shahaya mitalmidei basroi shel Rabbi Akiva Galili shaita. So the question is, it's mashma that in our Mishnah that Rabbi Yossi HaGlili was older than Rabbi Akiva, and yet elsewhere it's mashma that Brurya, the wife of Rameir is one of the last students of Rabbi Akiva, called Galili the fool, Galili Shaita. V'nira de Talmud Chaver Hayalai Rabbi Yossi HaGlili Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Yossi HaGlili was a Talmud Chaver of Rabbi Akiva. V'rach mimenu b'shanim hayu, he was younger. Even though in other places he's mentioned before Rabbi Akiva, Loi kasha the kamoy kain maskir ba'agadas ha-Pesach Rabbi Akiva koidem Rav Tarfon shehaya rabbi. Says Tosfos, you can make a big deal about an order. Why? What's the raya? The raya is the Haggadah. It says Rabbi Akiva before Rav Tarfon. Don't bring a raya that the fact that it says one person before the other, that means he's greater. It even mentions Rabbi Akiva before Rav Tarfon is Rebbi. How do we know he's his Rebbi? Says Tosfos, looking Kesuvos Pei Dalet Amud Beis. So Tosfos seems to be saying that Rabbi Yossi HaGlili is younger than Rabbi Akiva. By the way, we're going to have Rabbi Yossi HaGlili, I believe, in the Haggadah also. He's one of the opinions of how many Makos there were. Let's see, right? Let's go to the Haggadah. How many opinions were there of the Makos? You have Rabbi Akiva, you have Rabbi Yossi HaGlili, and who's the third Shita? What?
Rabbi Eliezer.
Rabbi Eliezer. You have Rabbi Yossi HaGlili, Rabbi Eliezer, and Rabbi Akiva. So it's interesting that Rabbi Yossi HaGlili would go first. Especially Tosfos is saying he's a Talmud Chaver of Rabbi Akiva. I guess that's another question you could ask. Why is Rabbi Yossi HaGlili mentioned first in...
The number of makkos, why it goes from less to
it goes from less to more. Mm-hmm. Okay. Be it as it may, I want to share with you one more thing. Tosfos doesn't really say. Tosfos says, don't make a big deal about the fact that it says Rabbi Yossi HaGlili before Rabbi Akiva, that somehow that means Rabbi Yossi HaGlili is greater. We have the same kind of thing that it says Rabbi Akiva before Rav Tarfon, like Asi was Medayik, and still Rabbi Akiva was a student of Rav Tarfon. So the Netziv in his Haggadah, he's bothered, okay, what's pshat in this Tosfos? Why would it say Rabbi Akiva before Rav Tarfon? And then it says, the Netziv says very simply, he says, Af agav Rav Tarfon haya kashish Rabbi Akiva, The Netziv in the Imrei Shefer says, even though he was older, V'ika Svara and Kesuvos Pedal Amid Beis, that Rav Tarfon was the Rebbi. Mikol Makam Chashiv Rav Akiva, Rav Tarfon Besoif, Mishum Shahaya B'Vnei Brak. Because you got to know where you are. This was B'nei Brak. Mekoymet Shel Rabbi Akiva, Kediyisa B'Sanhedrin, Achar Rabbi Akiva L'Bnei Brak. V'Havamar Da'asra, he's the rabbi. V'Adav Meir of Tarfon. Ayin Toisus Kesuvos Daf Kofhei Amid Aleph. So, the Netziv seems to be saying, I don't think, I would disagree with the Mesivta Haggadah. In other words, the Mesivta Haggadah learns that the Netziv is saying Pshat and Tosfos. I don't think so. Because the Mesivta Haggadah says, well, Tosfos says don't make a big deal about it, but Tosfos doesn't say why. So look in the Netziv, and the Netziv explains because Rabbi Akiva is Amar Da'asra. The Netziv, I don't think, is consistent with Tosfos. Because according to the Netziv, Tosfos no longer has a raya. Don't make a big deal about the fact of the order because it says Rabbi Akiva before Rav Tarfon. Well, according to the Netziv, the reason it says Rabbi Akiva before Rav Tarfon because Rabbi Akiva is the Mar Da'asra. So then that disproves the proof from the Haggadah that there's no seder in the order. Meaning Tosfos is trying to say, don't make a big deal about the order. The proof is the Haggadah, where it says Rabbi Akiva before Rav Tarfon. But according to Netziv, there's a reason for that. It's because Rabbi Akiva is a Mar Da'asra. So you don't have a proof anymore from the Haggadah. In any event, it's interesting that what we're learning in the Gemara is related to what we're going to say tomorrow night. Have an amazing Seder. Actually, I think we have to do Daf Pei. And I think we got to do it today somehow. No promises, but I think we got to do Daf Pei today. And I think tonight is during Badika. We might have to do it before Mincha. Let's see if we could do that. I'll let you know. What? You want to say something?
Interesting, but when it's Rabbi Yossi, like we he brings down the bottom of the sifta.
Yeah.
It has Rabbi Yossi has bring a raya from the Chatumin. The Gemara need to, bring a raya from Shaitan. I just thought it was interesting that it's Rabbi Yossi, I believe. And the Teretz is that he brings down Etfal again. It's not using Chatumin. So it's interesting.
Very good. Very good. Okay, have a good day, everyone. Shkayach.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.